Okay, we're going to get started with our second live session of the first day of New Music Weekend 2025. I'm thrilled to welcome Robyn Saunders and Jamie Redman here to discuss a lot of different things with you about their collaboration. This will be a Q&A focus session toward the end, so feel free as you're listening to type any questions in the chat. We will have time to address that, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Thank you so much.
Awesome, thank you, Jessica. So I'm going to do a classic screen share to get us started. Little presentation that we've got. There we go. Um, so as mentioned, we're going to be talking about dance, drag, and devised music. The topics we are going to cover, we're going to do a brief history of our work, just so you can kind of understand the history of our collaboration. We're going to be talking about our initial process to collaborative composition, the results of our research and development period, our personal takeaways, and then just some small pieces of advice if you want to try this yourself. And then, of course, we want to end with the Q&A. As mentioned, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat. I'll be doing most of the talking, but Jamie will be monitoring the chat, so if he can answer the question, he will do so, and if not, we'll make a note of it to address it first in the Q&A. So starting with just a little... Oh, that is not going to the next slide. That's fun. There we go. Starting with a brief history of us. So I've actually known Jamie since we were 11, which I think had a significant impact on our collaborative process. It meant we could be extremely open and honest with each other just because we knew each other so well. I first worked with Jamie as a dancer when he choreographed for me for Stockhausen's Decliner Harlequin for my master's recital. And then I asked him if he would dance for Unzuk Chin's Advice from a Caterpillar. So both those pieces were in my master's recital. I'm sure if you're attending this talk, you're probably familiar with these pieces, but I've included a little 30-second clip just so you get an idea of actually Jamie's choreography and his approach to dance with contemporary music. So this is a couple of clips from that. So this was a really enjoyable collaboration for me, and I think some of my big takeaways is firstly how well Jamie was able to improvise to contemporary clarinet music. I think it's actually a really unique skill that I haven't seen from many dancers, the ability to hear sounds you're not familiar with and respond with movement that fitted. And also the fact that Jamie is not a musician meant when he was choreographing Decliner Harlequin, he would have amazing ideas that I wouldn't consider, because at some point you're meant to be playing a top C with vibrato, and then Jamie says, oh, and then you're going to like roll over and stick your leg out, and you would never think of that if you're playing it, but it really challenged me in the best way, and he was thinking about the overall visuals. So it was a collaboration I desperately wanted to explore further. So the logistics, just to get them out of the way, we received funding from Help Musicians UK, and we were very grateful because they expected nothing from us. They said, we'll give you this money to work together. If you don't produce a single piece of work, absolutely fine. So we undertook four-hour-long workshops, and we went in it with three core ideas. We wanted to do a piece that I composed and then Jamie choreographed to. Then we wanted to do a piece that Jamie choreographed with no music, and then I actually composed to that choreography. And then we wanted a specifically drag-focused piece. And I would also say the drag kind of underpinned a lot of the ideas of the composition going forward. So getting into the bulk of the talking, the workshop process and what we actually did. So with the composed piece, this is the more typical way musicians would collaborate with dancers. You've written a piece or you're performing a piece, and then you find a dancer and ask them, do you want to dance to my piece? But in terms of the composition for this and how the drag inspired it, we knew all the works, we wanted to relate them back to issues that affected the LGBT community. And so for adolescents, I actually used hate crime statistics from Stonewall UK, and that made up all the time signatures that I was using. The actual numbers were the different percentages and statistics. And then if anyone is familiar with FDA by Ben Folds, I had a similar idea with the notes of the melody. So the notes of the melody spell out certain homophobic words. So you've got the melody and the time signatures, and that's how I wrote it. But I'm going to hand over to Jamie briefly now to talk about how he felt then choreographing to that existing piece and his process.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Jamie. And yeah, from the music that Robyn kind of composed and gave me, I created a storyline of this like oppressive school environment, with different influences that you experience while growing up queer in that kind of oppressive environment. Um, Robyn actually became the focus during the choreography of those oppressions. It started with just me asking her to give me a look to discipline me, and then it became her like patrolling like a prison guard up and down. She was like a bully, a teacher, a parent, all of them just trying to oppress me. And that's how the piece grew choreographically, really.
Yeah, and it was really interesting for me as the composer because it was a storyline I didn't have in my head at all. I was purely on statistics. I was fully down that rabbit hole. And so hearing that James had a full storyline, and then that obviously affected the composition in certain ways. And the addition of the movement had logistical implications on the composition as well. As a one example, there was a section in 3/4, and when I wrote it, I thought, oh, this will be kind of in 3/4, but it's very free. But Jamie did this awesome waltz that was such a nice waltz that we then went, okay, we're going to lean into the 3/4 and recompose it to be a stereotypical waltz that then complements the movements. There was a few little tweaks like that. But as mentioned, this is the more typical way in which you would see musicians work with dancers. Whereas the piece Addiction, which was choreographed by Jamie first before any music was made, took up the heavy focus of our R&D time, and because Jamie started it, I am going to hand back to him to talk about how he came up with the choreography.
Yeah, so obviously I had no music to go off, which is where you usually start. So I kind of drew on my own experiences of addiction, and because of that, it meant that this was a queer experience of addiction. Um, and I began with analyzing what you could become addicted to, how that felt initially, that the upside of it, and then the other side of it, the um when the addiction becomes a big problem. And those feelings translated into movements, and then they translated into vibes that I would just tell Robyn, oh, this bit's like this and this bit's like that, but she's going to talk a bit more about that later. Um, and just for example, we had a repeating phrase at the beginning that I needed just something to repeat over and over to get the motif ready, so it set up the rest of the piece for the different types of addiction: smoking, drinking, drugs, affection, blah blah blah. But yeah, handing back to Robyn.
Yeah, so as James mentioned in the workshop, he would just kind of give me words and vibes. So I wrote down a couple of my favorites. That one time he said, "This is the shaky, shivery bit." That was good fun, and that came up a few times as we were doing it. And another one was he had two different types of psychedelic. So I used to get confused because I would say, "I thought I did psychedelic." He went, "No, you did psychedelic loud. I want psychedelic quiet." And so it was kind of interesting hearing how his brain worked in terms of translating that movement. And then we would essentially improvise on those themes for quite a long time until we thought we had maybe developed something. And then the final piece, which was heavily drag inspired. For those who aren't familiar with drag as an art form, it's extremely visual. Whether you're a musician, whether you're a comedian, that you got models who are drag artists. All of them have in common that there is always that visual element because that's how you kind of get the genderqueer nature that underpins drag. So with the final piece, we always had images. That was the big inspiration from the get-go, was to have this one image that we were aiming for. So the first two I've got here are actually, well, I'll let Jamie talk about these because these were the two that you had in your head.
Yeah. Yes, I had this idea of the contrasting the red of the AIDS ribbon and the black of silence equals death, and the conflict of those, both the hope and the tragedy, battling it out, and that became the Paint It Black piece. I came in with a lot of ideas. I wanted millions of dancers and silk performers, And yeah, but it turned out the composition really spoke for itself. So I ended up just doing the kind of modeling the typical drag reveal from red to black, just with the outfit, and that it really worked. And I wasn't necessarily on stage for that long, but the impact of it, I think, really made it stand out.
Definitely, I'd agree with that. The piece in total is about 7 minutes, and I think James is on stage for maybe 2 to 3 minutes maximum.
Yeah.
And it also influenced the composition. So the final photo you can see there is Jamie and I performing this, and that was right after the reveal. And obviously, when Jamie said, "I'm going to do this reveal of this red to this black," that would then meant, well, that's got to be the peak of the composition then. So it always came back to what we were visually going to see on stage. The middle image with the aerial, kind of silk aerialist, is an interesting one because that was what we would have done if we had unlimited money. We always said we just want silk aerialists falling from the sky with these red and black ribbons. And so I wanted to include that just because I know that was, as we were doing it, we always came back to that. And I think it affected the costuming, and that's why the red that you can see has been ripped off was all kind of very fabricy, and the black was just very, very solid, and it reflected kind of the imagery we had. So what I've got now is I went through our lovely 16 hours of workshop footage, and I've put together this kind of 2.5 minute video where you can kind of see the process of how we particularly worked on the piece Addiction, which is the one that Jamie choreographed and then I wrote to. So I'm just going to play this all for you, and it hopefully gives better than we can describe what actually went on and how we went from that movement into a final finished piece.
Then Smokey. Hi.
Oh yeah.
When I start running from this side,
Okay. Looking at each other, and then
you play something feeling.
I was just trying to think of something to play that's like.
That was fine.
That was Mozart.
Coke, psychedelics, floaty heroin. Whenever you're ready. I can stand back here waving my arms for ages.
I was having a great time.
Across here, and then round, and then the 4-starch down to here.
Yeah.
Roll, wait there for a bit.
And then it's the.
And then it's smoking.
I wait for your arm thing.
Sorry, I did it wrong. What's next?
I know what's next. Nicotine. You start, will you die there?
I believe you for now. Yes!
Let me just grab my notebook.
It's G, it's the G sharp.
Oh, lovely.
Okay, we don't need to clarinet. I'll just do it. There we go. Get up. Gracefully.
How do we get up?
I'll show you later.
Oh.
Yeah!
So yeah, that's kind of where we got to by the end of the workshop process. And as I mentioned earlier, we didn't have to produce anything at all. They would have been, help musicians would have been very happy if we just said, yeah, we did it, nothing worked, we're moving on. But thankfully, we kind of had produced some ideas. And since that initial workshop period, which took place nearly 2 years ago, we have now created 15 collaborative co-created works across both contemporary clarinet, classical clarinet, but also we've produced drag pieces and musical theatre songs. And what was particularly interesting for me is when I was going through these workshops, how many themes and motifs from our other songs all link back to this initial work. So I wanted to put this video together, and essentially what it shows is a period of improvisation, so what we were doing when we were just improvising in the workshop. Then it shows a scratch performance that we did of those pieces, And then it actually shows a performance we did at the Other Palace, which is a musical theatre venue in London. So not a place you would typically see a clarinetist do kind of solo work. And we did a bunch of musical theatre songs. So you kind of see the improvisation become a motif, then becoming a vocal line in this final performance.
Addiction, I thought I was fixing all the problems causing me friction, but that was just fiction when I hit the bottom stop. But it's my breathing running through my head like being anything to hold back screaming euphoria.
So yeah, hopefully that gives you some idea of other stuff that we've created. So then when putting this presentation together, Jamie and I sat down a few days ago and kind of talked about our takeaways from the project and what we kind of thought and what we learned from it. So the first thing is that collaboration with other art forms outside of music is a highly useful tool for composers to inspire new work. As I mentioned earlier, Jamie and I have known each other since we were 11, and the fact that we had such a good personal relationship is one of the reasons I wanted to collaborate with him. And I would say, if there's someone in your life that maybe is not a musician, but has another art form that you might not know much about, but you know you get on with them on a personal level, it's worth considering or pursuing that as a potential collaboration. And I know for me as a composer, as well as a performer, having that external art form to kind of help move and inspire the work was just invaluable, and otherwise I just kind of get stuck in a bit of a rut of what to do. The other one is that the outcome of starting with the choreography is that the movement is now an integral part of the piece. I think more so than anything else we've done together, you know, Adolescence, the one I composed, I have performed without Jamie and can perform without Jamie. You know, going back to the Unzuk Chin, I love it when Jamie's there, but it does work without him if I need to. Whereas Addiction, to me, does not work at all without the movement. It's such a key part of the piece. And so I would never perform it unless I could have a dancer there to do that movement. The other is that I think it makes contemporary works, especially contemporary clarinet works, more palatable to non-classical audiences. The Other Palace, as mentioned, is a musical theatre venue. We sold out, which was kind of amazing, and the entire audience were all musical theatre fans. Most of them, the biggest question we got was what instrument was I playing, because they weren't even familiar with a clarinet, let alone a bass clarinet. So that was really interesting, and we did the musical theatre songs to kind of appease them, but we also did Addiction and Adolescence and these contemporary works. And Addiction, despite being probably the most avant-garde of any of the contemporary clarinet works we put in, was the one that people were most on board with and most connected to. We did a Q&A after that performance, and that was something they noted, that it was a sound world they'd never heard before, but they really, really enjoyed it. So it can be a really useful tool working with a dancer if you want to take work into venues that maybe they wouldn't normally be there or see that kind of music. And then, of course, it expands the horizons for both art forms and performers. I never thought I'd be doing a sellout show at the Other Palace. That's kind of insane to think I did that as a clarinetist. But equally, Jamie's performed at the International Clarinet Festival, which as a dancer is also just so kind of random. And equally as drag artist, that's sort of another one where people are like, you've done what? So having that collaboration has just expanded the venues and places that both of us have performed. And then finally, it challenged us, but in a really, really good way, of our individual abilities. You know, I mentioned earlier, Jamie was always pushing me to have the movement and always pushing for that storyline and to think of overarching things, and having to learn his language and how to match with his movement was so much fun, but also really challenging. And that was great. And I think I've carried that forward into other projects that I've done. And then I know, Jamie, you mentioned a couple of things where it was challenging you, I think, in adolescence.
Yeah. Well, the time signatures in adolescence, because they were so complex because you wanted it with the statistics and constantly changing. We all know dancers want to do everything in an 8 count. So me trying to switch from 7/8 to 3/4 to 5/9, whatever.
I think the funniest was when I said, "Could you tap dance?" And you were like, "Not to this."
Not to this, I'm afraid. Yeah, there was a section that you wanted a little bit of soft shoe, but we made it work. It was good, and yeah,
that was your main one. Was actually those times.
My main one.
So yeah, those are kind of our takeaways, and then I just thought I'd include 3 things that we thought, if you wanted to try this yourself or explore a new avenue, what we would suggest. So first one being, find collaborators where you can both be open-minded and honest. I think Jamie and I, having known each other so long, that was a given, and it was so helpful that when you're trying new ideas, we could say, is this not working because it doesn't work, or is it not working because you can't do it, or it's a bit rubbish, or like, we were happy to just be honest, or say, yeah, I did that really badly, but it'll work later, don't worry about it, or just say, I don't like this, can we try something else? And I think that's really, really important in a collaboration for new work. This is one that Jamie pointed out, but I agreed. Write what you know and what you're passionate about. I think it seems obvious, but we sometimes forget. Before working with Jamie, I'd never written anything to do with being queer or the LGBT community, despite the fact it's such a big part of my life. And I think because I'm in that community, it felt a bit been there, done that, and I'm surrounded by it, so it didn't feel new. And I was like, why would I write about that? Everyone writes about that. And actually, it was only once working with Jamie and performing it that we realised, oh no, we're just in a bubble where it feels like this has been there, done that, but actually it's not. And in the context of doing it with the clarinet and all that sort, it was quite new, and it was really interesting, and it was such an easy starting point for both of us to say, this is what we both know, let's do that. And then the final one, and I realised we were extremely lucky and privileged that we had funding that enabled us to not need to worry about producing anything. But new creations don't have to work, and the mindset of knowing whatever we do doesn't have to work. If it does work, brilliant, but if it doesn't, absolutely fine. I think having that mindset was awesome, and it's a mindset I'm definitely taking forward into any projects I work on from now on. Even if I do have to produce something at the end, I'll worry about that later. But I think the initial thing should be like, let's pretend like it doesn't have to work. And it just really opened up the possibilities. Cool. And thank you for listening. That's all our spiel done. So we're going to have some time to answer some questions now. I'll stop my lovely screen share, or I'll try to. My mouse has disappeared. It did this earlier. There we go. Awesome. And then we can answer questions.
Yeah, so if you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free to either open your microphone or type it in the chat, and I'll be happy to read it for them. My first question to you, Robyn, specifically, as a clarinetist, how did you work on tonal stability with all of the movements that you had to do, stamina? Because obviously playing music is one thing, and you always have to expend a certain amount of energy to do that, but moving in a way that's not typical for most clarinetists has also got to be pretty draining. So I'm curious how you worked on that, what your process looked like, and were there any suggestions on how to do that ourselves?
Yeah, that is a great question. Definitely when I was doing the Stockhausen, that was a big concern, the stamina. And yeah, so weirdly enough, when Jamie was teaching me the dance for the Stockhausen, I asked him this exact thing. I was like, I'm meant to run around while circular breathing, and I'm just up here dying, and it's on a top A, and I can't keep it stable. And Jamie sent me an hour-long intensive cardio workout, and he told me to do it every day. And I did. And then I'm not in that peak physical fitness anymore, but I did. By the time I reached my master's recital, I felt like I could run a marathon. So there is an element, I think, of just physical health to doing that kind of thing, for sure, in terms of the cardio. And tonal stability, I think with regards to creating new pieces, it was handy that because we were creating them, I could do it knowing what kind of movement was happening. So I think with a lot of the soundscapes we had, I think they intentionally aren't doing things like jumping crazy registers or stuff like that. Like sometimes it might be, I'm going to stay in this sound world because I know that's what's stable for what I'm doing at the moment. Or saving some things for moments where I wasn't moving. So I know at one point in Addiction, I think I said to Jamie, I was like, at this point, can I just like sit down on the platform for the next 4 minutes? And he was like, yeah, that'll look great. And I'll stand behind you and wave my... And so I was like, perfect. So at that point, I'm like, great, I can just sit here and I'm not moving. And that's when I can put in all these ideas versus when we've got other movement. And then very boring answer of like everything, it does just take like practice. Like you kind of get it stable and then you do the movement slowly and you piece it together and go, okay, that works, and getting used to it. But we did have a few moments. I think the funniest one, I mean, Jamie, you always say this, the funniest one is when I couldn't get up off the floor while playing.
You could get up towards the right, but she couldn't get up towards the left.
I couldn't. It was so hard.
I choreographed the whole thing, and then we had to flip the whole dance because she couldn't get up on the correct side, so it was fine. But yeah, I remember attending Clarinet Fest, and we were at a workshop about delay pedals, and the guy was talking about, oh, you've got to practice like lifting your foot up to press the delay pedal. It's really difficult. I was like, is it? Because the first thing I worked on, Robyn, was just constantly, if you just stick your leg out here and then back there and then roll on your back. And I just didn't even consider that would be a thing.
Yeah, it was because you taught me proper tap dancing steps for the Stockhausen, which I know most people, and I understand, most people, they're just stamping the feet in rhythm, which makes complete sense. James was like, no, you're going to do heel, heel, toe, toe. He was like, but, and he was teaching me, and so learning to do that while playing, I was like, but once you get it, it's like many things, a skill set that I think sticks with you. So that helped in the collaborative process. And the fact that Jamie is he was ready to re-choreograph something if needed. You know, if it was like, that just won't work, he would be like, great, let's see if we can make it work. Hence the getting up off the floor. Because he just discovered I couldn't, I think it was my left-hand side, I just couldn't seem to stand up while playing. It was something about it. And he was like, but you can do it on the right, so we'll just flip it and then that'll work. So yeah, that was kind of what we did.
For Addiction, Jamie, after having worked with Robyn for her piece, did you do that in that specific order? Did you write your piece and then have Jamie choreograph and then do Jamie's choreography? Or was that sort of a different order? Because I'm curious, after working together on the first piece with Addiction, did you start to hear clarinet as you were choreographing? I mean, I don't know if that's an unfortunate thing for you, but it wouldn't be for me.
Honestly, not particularly right at the start, but then as we started developing, you could see in the videos me going like, and I had like the idea of where the notes would go occasionally, but it was generally mostly that kind of, okay, play something appealing, play nightclub, play speakeasy kind of. It was more that and the vibe than specifically a clarinet. That was Robyn's job.
Yeah. But it was always nice when you got it, when you started just mumbling little phrases at me. That was always nice. Yeah. But I think in terms of that first workshop, it was, to be fair, we'd kind of, when we'd applied for the funding, I'd written that these were the 3 pieces we intended to create. So in workshop 1, it was, I arrived with a composition for Adolescence, Jamie arrived with the choreography for Addiction, and it was just, okay, now we're going to be in the room and see what happens. So they kind of happened simultaneously, as well as the Paganini Paints It Black, which I talked about a little less. But yeah, it definitely all happened kind of at the same time. We just got in the room and that's it. But we very quickly realised that Addiction was the one that was going to take most of our time up, because I think Adolescence, we both kind of knew what we were doing individually, and so actually the collaboration, there wasn't much to add to it. Whereas Addiction, it was just really interesting to be like, what is going on in your brain? And yeah, I mean, it's hours of footage of sometimes me. At one point, I think Jamie just told me, can you just scream into your clarinet and chase me around the room? And so I've got about
And
10
you
minutes
did.
of footage of me doing that. And that was one of those things where we watched it back and went, doesn't work. Fun though. So yeah, we're kind of doing it all sort of simultaneously, but we spent definitely the most amount of time on addiction with that in that regard.
With my last question, I'm just curious about the grant process and what you did to prepare. How did you find that opportunity? Do you have any advice for people who are looking to step their toes into this kind of collaborative effort? I think funding is different, obviously, in every country and what opportunities are there. But if you have any suggestions, just generally on how you approach that kind of application, knowing that there was no expectation, but you obviously said you prepared a suggestion that you're going to work on 3 pieces. But how did you come to that? And generally, how did that work?
Yeah, so the timing for us, like most funding things, was we got very lucky. At the time, Help Musicians had a really, really specific fund called the Collaborators Fund, and it was purely about creating new collaborations. And so we just got lucky that there was something that aligned so perfectly with what we wanted to do. And and that was actually a criteria of the funding, was that they didn't want you to really promise to produce anything, because Help Musicians have other types of funding where you do. So they had it's all different now, but they had recording and releasing, touring, they had the equipment fund, and then they had the collaborators fund. And the other 3, there was an absolute, you must produce an album and release it, you must tour, and we must see the receipts, and we must see how many people you reached, how many sales you made, blah blah blah. The collaborators was the only one that existed that it just said, our aim is to pay people to work with other people, and that's all we want. We want to pay 2 people to work together. So we got very, very lucky that it completely lined up with what we wanted to do. And we've done quite a few funding applications now, and I'm happy to say we're usually rather successful at them. But I think big advice with funding applications is definitely, like, you've definitely got to stand out in some shape or form. You've got to have something that really hooks them from the start. They read so many applications that they're just going to turn off the second they start reading. And so I know when I apply, I maybe do simplify what we do. So I think when I've applied for things, I've been like, we are drag kings that play clarinet and dance. Like, bam, that's it. That's our selling point. They give us money. So that's like the first thing. And then take advantage of like mentoring and things like that sometimes come with funding or can come before funding. I think a lot of because I used to teach at a conservatoire, and a lot of students ask me about funding stuff, and some of them maybe don't take advantage of when there are these pre-funding help sessions that you can attend, and they're normally free and they're so useful. So when we had our funding, we had mentoring about funding from someone who was then on the panel for a different funding board. So as part of that, we basically did an application to her other job, and she just told us, yeah, that works, take that out, that works. And then we could submit that, and we got more funding, and it was great. So I think take advantage of any time there's mentoring or advice sessions or anything that's going to help you prepare funding. Find that unique selling point, that USP that you can quickly be like, bam, 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 this is what I'm doing. And even if, like the Collaborators Fund, they don't expect a finished product, definitely have an outcome. So when I applied for that, I made very clear that the outcome for me at the time, and this has changed many times throughout the years, but at the time I was saying, I'll do this collaboration with Jamie, I'll learn way more about storytelling, it will make me a better performer, I'll get more work, and eventually I'll do a PhD in the area of dance and drag and clarinet. Like, I was very like, bam, 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 this is the outcome. Whether I've done those things is up for debate, but that was like the outcome, even if we didn't produce a piece. And so I think even for those kind of funds, tell them what you're going to do and what it will help you achieve, and usually works out in the end.
Oh, that's so great. Thank you both so much.
Thank
Can you
you.
share with us
Thank you.
how people can find you, either on socials, or what's the best way to contact you if they have additional questions?
Yep, absolutely. So best place for me is actually on Instagram. It's annoyingly not my name. It's Robyn Reed's Drag King. So I will type it just because I don't have a personal Instagram account. So that's Robyn Reed's Drag King is probably the best place where I'm the most responsive. And then I'm also actually happy if anyone wants my email, I'll put that as well. So that's just my email that you can get in touch with if there's any other questions. And usually if we have shows or work or stuff, that will be at Robyn Reed's Drag King.
I'll pop mine in there as well, just in case you want to follow me on Instagram.
Jamie Redman UK. Yeah, and I'll just say
Redman
thank you so much for having us and for Jamie. So note the reason we're on separate screens is because Jamie's in New Zealand, and that's also why our lighting is very different. So I'm nearly 10 p.m. It's nearly 10 a.m. tomorrow for
10
Jamie.
a.m. for me.
Well, thank you for being on opposite sides of the world and coming together to present for us. We really enjoyed having you. If you joined a little bit late, we'll have this session up on the YouTube channel shortly after I get it edited. And we thank you again. We'll see you tomorrow, starting at 12 p.m. Eastern for our first live session. And you can find all of the links on the ICA's website. We'll see you then. Bye, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone.